Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, welcome back to the MSL 411 podcast. We have a great episode today talking about an inevitable part of working in the industry, change. Layoffs. They can happen to anyone, anywhere, in any company, big company, small company. So we hope this episode will be helpful for you on this very tough topic. Before it happens to you, hopefully, of course, recent news of large, very reputable pharma company laid off an entire department, which I think included 60 MSLs and over 400 salespeople, potentially. I think about that number. And there were a lot of people that were blindsided. Of course, this happens all the time in industry, but, there are people that were not expecting it and never thought it would happen to them. And so we thought this was a good thing to talk about that will hopefully be referenced long after this current moment. But we wanted to talk about this and also, give a plug to go back to the resume roadmap season of our show and go back through that information. It's great information if you are somebody that is in this situation or has been awoken to the fact that this can happen to you just as it did to them. So had to give a plug for that season. I loved September. I loved our back to school month. It was a lot of fun. But we are moving on to new topics. And today we are talking about the realities of the market. I mean, there were people that we talked to who had been in their positions for 15 years with that company, more than 15 years.
They were lifers.
Yes, exactly. And, thinking it could never happen to them, but sure enough, it did.
Yeah, and I think it always throws people for a loop, especially those folks that when we call them and they've been in their position 10, 15 years or even 5, 10 years, and they say, nope, I'm great. I love it here. Paid really well. Love what I'm doing. I'm going to be here till I retire.
Yeah.
It's tough when those people find themselves in this situation because it's not what they expected. It's not at all where they saw their career going. So when something like that happens, when a situation like that arises, I wanted you to talk a little bit more to what candidates and MSLs can do from a preparation standpoint to feel more confident, just in case an event like that arises or when an event like that arises.
Yeah. A lot of people who maybe don't have the experience in industry or think that they're kind of untouchable, haven't seen this happen to themselves or someone they know, they could be overwhelmed when they find themselves in this position. And so in this episode, we really wanted to talk about this so that people feel like they know what they can do from a proactive standpoint. You can't prevent these things, of course, but how can you be ready when you respond? And I think it comes down really to three things. Number one is having your resume ready, which is why we, of course, had to reference back to the resume episodes we just did. Have your resume ready. This is something that we are constantly drilling at our candidates because it's so important. It can be a lot to try and whip that up when you have the pressure of a layoff looming over you. You feel like you've got to panic apply for things. So have that ready. Have that in good shape consistently. Put on your calendar once a quarter that you're going to update your resume with some of the achievements or things that you've done over the time in your role. Secondly, I would say having relationships with trusted recruiters. Specifically, of course, Symbio specializes in MSL recruitment. Having relationships with MSL recruiters specifically, I think, is so important because those are the people that you can call and say, hey, did you hear the news? Or a lot of times I'll call candidates, I've heard the news, they haven't called me yet. And they're like, how did you hear about that already?
Like they just got off the phone.
Yes. We're all knowing. And then third is, I think, keeping tabs on the market that we're in. Something you can do from a preparation standpoint or feel a little bit more confident when you find yourself in this situation is understanding the market you're in, the number of jobs that are available, the number of candidates, that ratio too, because that is really needs to inform your thinking about your game plan, your next steps. So those I would say would be kind of the three big things. But going back to the first point of, okay, you're an MSL now, you've got a resume, it's probably in decent shape. Why do we put such an emphasis on being resume ready? And what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, preparation is going to be your best friend because, again, you never know when a situation like this is going to happen. It usually is a surprise. So first, you just want to make sure you're putting the key achievements that you've had in your career on your resume. And if you're waiting a year, 2 years, 10 to 15 years to put those on your resume, I mean, it's really hard to recall some of those to your memory when it's that far down the line. So if you had a cool project that you assisted on, or that you led, or you did something really cool at a conference, or anything like that that you think would be a selling point for you as an MSL, put that on your resume. Like you said, add a quarterly note to your calendar to do that, or just after it happens, just say, hey, that was really a cool experience. I'm going to go ahead and put that on there so I don't forget about it, and add all the cool details. It's just really hard to go back and think after the fact, so far after the fact, about all the key achievements and what that looked like, and you kind of forget those details the further you get from them. A second thing I would say is just to jump on new opportunities as they arise. So if you have to stop and update your resume, chances are you're going to miss the boat on some really cool opportunities. Time is of the essence. And like you mentioned with that large pharma company that laid off a whole division, well, guess what? There's 60 something people with your exact same background and exact same experience, all flooding the market looking for the same position. So now you know what your candidate pool looks like that you're up against. And so, in a layoff situation, you need to jump on opportunities and be the first to apply for those, to get your name in front of the hiring manager, or at least among the first. And so if you're having to stop and update the last 2, 5, 10 years of your resume before you can apply for positions, I mean, there's going to be MSLs that have it ready to go, that have been keeping it up, that are just applying on the spot and getting their name in the door and getting those interviews. And so they may have gone through 1 or 2 rounds of interviews before you even get your name in the hat. So you don't want to miss out on opportunities. And in a situation like this, time is of the essence. These positions go fast. And when the market is flooded, hiring managers are getting multiple candidates, multiple applications of people that are super qualified to do the job. So they're hurrying through the interview stage. They're hurrying to get these people moved to finals, and they're filling these positions quickly. So you want to be ready to go. Another thing I would say is that some folks have their resume less in a resume format, I guess more of a CV. And so you want to make sure, and you can kind of go back to our resume roadmap series where we talk a little bit about these types of things, but we hear a lot, should I have a resume? Should I have a CV? Really, a hybrid is going to be your best bet, where it shows a lot of your publications, your authorship, anything that you've done. And in that sense, it shows your educational background, but it also lists the experience that you've had at each employer. And so it's kind of a combination or a hybrid of both. Again, if you're one of those folks that has more of a CV, or maybe more of a straightforward resume that's 1 page or something like that, you really want to beef that up and be able to show all of these areas and kind of have the best of both in one document. So if you're having to restructure or redo, revamp, it takes time. And I know some people may be thinking, oh, I'll just go in real quick. It'll be like a 1 or 2 hour job. I'll go in and add my latest updates, add that latest job I held, or that latest title I held, and the responsibilities I had. But really, there's formatting issues you could run into. There are memory issues you could run into with remembering all the details. There are a lot of things that could stretch that quick resume update out to days. And so again, you want to make sure you have all those things done quarterly, monthly, whatever works for you. Put it on your calendar, like you suggested. Can't say that enough. And make sure you get those things done. Even if you're like, hey, a layoff would never happen for me, put those accomplishments on your resume. You may want to go in and ask for a raise or ask for a promotion at your company. If things are good there, you're not sensing a layoff, you may just use it for that. Like, hey, I was looking at my resume and going over my last year and noticed I've been able to do this, this, and that. So you may be able to use that for that information. So in many ways, it's great to keep your resume updated, but preparing for a layoff or potential layoffs is probably the most important.
You always want to be ready. And just a note on, transitioning from a CV style to resume. I think the people who generally fit that category are people who are in their first role. And if you are in your first role, you probably haven't experienced a layoff before. And so, I think we're really speaking to these guys specifically who would be made very nervous by a situation like this. So it's always being ready to go. I mean, we had a situation last month where, we had a couple candidates at the final stages of an interview, and there was like a last minute person who had applied. They zoomed that person through the interview process and they ended up getting the job. And you never know like where you are in this stage of an application. If you might be that last person that just like slipped in under the wire, able to get the resume in, zoom through the process and be the one because of just, how timing works out. I think a lot of folks and maybe our listeners don't necessarily know that those things go on all the time. And so that's why we do stress um, time is of the essence because it is, and we see it all the time, and it's that background knowledge. I think.
Oh yeah, there's been so many clients of ours where we talk about them among our team, and well, they're looking at 2 finalists right now, but they'd still entertain another candidate if you find a great fit or somebody with the right experience. And so there is still time in a lot of the situations to zoom in, and yeah, it does happen.
It happens. We talked about earlier the understanding the market that we're in. Let's talk a little bit about what we mean by that, and what are some of the factors to consider.
I think that's a really great question. I would actually love to hear your take on it. Okay. And I know you have a lot of good information on this, but I think it's a great thing to explain to our listeners and our watchers, and kind of give them a little insider information on that as well.
Yeah. Well, you alluded to it when you have the market flooded with, just in this example, I mean, one layoff put 60 MSLs on the market.
It's crazy.
We have clients all the time where, maybe the position is covering a 10-state geography, or it's covering a third of the country, or whatever the case may be. There may be 5 people within your organization or your team who would technically fit that one position because of the way the geography is drawn. So you might have people that are within your own organization that could be competition for you. There's obviously MSLs from other companies, other organizations that you might be competing against for the job. It could be a variation in the different therapeutic backgrounds. So maybe you are somebody who has a little bit of dermatology experience, a little bit of immunology experience, but you've been working in the room space for a while now, but are kind of wanting to maybe go back to the derm world. You could be interviewing against people who've been in derm for 5 years. And so from a market standpoint, you aren't walking in with the most ideal experience. Not to say that you wouldn't be a good candidate, but you aren't, top of the list of what they're looking for in terms of connections and relationships, and how you spent the last 5 years. And so understanding where you fit in the market for the positions that you're applying for, and doing that self-reflection also to see, what are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? How specific are you in terms of what you're willing to consider? Are you open to derm and rheum and allergy, other areas of immunology? Or are you somebody who's saying, I only want to work in derm? The pool of positions that you can apply for is much smaller if you're going to be very specific in that area. So let's think about what that means for your job search. That means that you have a lot of competition by folks who, in the case where it's a larger geography, that means there could be MSLs from anywhere on that third of the country, Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Colorado, wherever, that you're competing against. So you've got people from all different states. You've got people with all different types of dermatology background. Maybe this hiring manager is somebody who has their heart set on somebody with psoriasis experience, or atopic derm, or whatever the case may be. And so there might be differences within the derm field itself, or maybe it's oncology and they have their heart set on somebody with solid tumor experience in breast cancer specifically. But, there's all kinds of people applying with all different types of oncology experience. You just don't know what the market is looking like from that standpoint. There's also what is the territory that they've covered before? Maybe the people you are interviewing against have covered more of that geography, and you've maybe just focused on California. There's the compensation side of it too. Are your compensation expectations commensurate with your experience, or is somebody that you're interviewing against more in line with what's typically paid for somebody of that years of experience, and you're asking for 20K more than them? There's so many different factors to who you might be competing against in this market that somebody needs to take under consideration. So, experience, compensation, geography, relationships that you covered. I mean, there's so much to who you might be competing against. And then there's just plain old skills. How is your scientific acumen? How are you as a presenter, as a communicator? You can't possibly know who you're interviewing against in those departments and what their strengths are. So having a really realistic conversation with yourself about what you're open to and what you bring to the table, and keeping that in mind as you look at different things.
And sometimes it can even come down to things like personality fit,
Mm-hmm.
where two people are both even scientifically, and it just comes down to who kind of meshes better or has the better conversation. So yeah, it can be any number of things that you are just completely unaware of behind the scenes. So those are good points. Yeah.
And I would say experience level too. If you are somebody who's 10 years into your MSL career and you are really at the top of every compensation range, the market of what's going to be available to you just purely from a compensation standpoint is going to be a lot slimmer than somebody who's maybe in that 2 to 3 year, 4 year category. So, just really checking in with yourself, identifying what are the must haves and what are the nice to haves, and having that conversation openly with your recruiter that will allow us to help you find things. I mean, I had a situation with a woman who was, well into her career, top of the compensation range, really held fast on what she's looking for on her base salary. And she just had unrealistic expectations. She was 20K over the average of what our clients are paying at the top of an MSL salary range. And I've called her about many positions, but being stuck on that one thing, she's been holding on. It's been probably well over a year now, and nothing has really been an option for her because of that. So really understanding the market and really understanding, like, not to say that she's not worth that, but what is realistic for somebody to pay, so important.
I completely agree on that one. And I think that's where if you're working with a recruiter, having that relationship with your trusted recruiter is going to be so important, because they know what's important to you. We've had all those conversations. We know, okay, here's my priority list. First is going to be this, and second, this over here. Science is top of my list, compensation second or third. They kind of have listed it out and talked to you about it. So if a position becomes available, hey, I know this doesn't tick all the boxes for you. It's a little bit of a pay decrease, but it's in that disease state that you told me that you would be so excited to hear about any kind of roles in, or it's with that company that you wanted me to keep my eye on for you, or any number of things, or it's a 2-state territory, and I know that was really important to you. So having that relationship and having those conversations after you've thought about what's most important to you, what you're willing to be flexible on, and having that open and honest conversation with your recruiter so they can keep that in mind and be your source of what's going on in the industry to let you know, okay, this might be interesting enough for me to just throw my hat in the ring, have a conversation, even though it doesn't meet all the things I'm looking for. It has 4 out of 5, and that's pretty darn good. So, that's, I think, one of the many ways where having that relationship with your recruiter, not waiting until you're in a bind and in a layoff situation to introduce yourself, build that relationship, tell them about your background, tell them what you're interested in, have them start looking, but having those conversations ahead of time. And then when this does occur, you give that call to your recruiter, or if you're working with a Symbio recruiter, they call you minutes after you get the news and say, hey, I just heard the news. I have 3 things I want to get you started looking at, and I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I'm going to call my contacts over at this company and see what's going on with this position over here. I'm on this for you. And so I think that just is one of the benefits of many benefits of working with a recruiter who knows you well, knows your likes, knows your dislikes, knows your priorities and your motivations, and knows the industry, knows their clients. And so
is able to be honest with you too, to say, hey, I know this is really what you want, but here's what I'm seeing out in the market, and here's what I think is realistic for you. And I don't think that you can necessarily have that relationship with somebody you just met or just messaged you on LinkedIn and you guys scheduled a call that same day. I don't know if that trust is necessarily going to be there. So the longevity of the relationship that we can fall back on, where I can go and say, hey, Michelle, I hear you. I want this for you too. I know this has been a goal. We've been talking about this, but this is what I feel like is realistic. And I'm not doing my job and being a good partner to you unless I'm telling you like what I'm seeing, what I think is realistic. And, we can always try, but here's what you may not be considering. I think that trust in the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I know firsthand how many of my candidates that I know really well and have all those conversations with that I get so emotionally invested in. And so when something like this happens, if they find themselves in a layoff, I take it personally, and it's my mission to help them and to find something for them. And so I'm on it for them. So again, you want that person in your corner, having your back. I mean, you're doing your job, you're out there looking, but you also have this other person who is looking for jobs for you like it's their job, because it is.
Because it is.
So yeah, you want that in your corner for sure.
Absolutely. And I hope this has been a great conversation. Some things for you guys to think about ultimately. I know we are employed by the very nature of layoffs. That, certainly keeps us busy. But change is hard for everybody. And so I hope this has been helpful for some things to think about that might keep you a little open next time you get a call from one of your Symbio recruiter friends, and will keep you open-minded to having a conversation, keeping that relationship. So hope this has been helpful for you. Please text us. Use the link in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, of course, you can always reach out on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.